Captain Jareth never trusted portals. He had a strict "if I can't see the other side, it probably wants to kill me" policy. But orders were orders, and here he was, stepping through another one. Reality flickered like a dodgy holo feed, and suddenly they were standing on what was technically a piece of Dyson swarm. Technically, because it looked more like a junkyard married a war zone and their kids were delinquent warlords. "Welcome to paradise," Jareth muttered, surveying the chaos. His boots crunched on what might have been a bone or a very unfortunately shaped rock. If your idea of paradise is a place where tetanus is an inheritance. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Kira, gave a snort. You'd think with all their tech, they'd invent something better than a dystopian death trap. She kicked a rusted can that clattered and rolled until it hit a deactivated battle drone. Jareth grinned. "Give him credit, Kira. They managed to make a Dyson fragment look like a landfill. That's commitment to aesthetics right there." The team spread out, their armor humming with the low buzz of shields and systems coming online. They were here to meet with the warlord in charge, a charming individual known for his love of human heads as mantle decor. Charming fellow. "All right, folks," Jareth said, clapping his hands. "We've got a date with the local warlord. Let's try not to offend him until after we've found out whether he wants to kill us outright or just enslave us." Private Rook, the team's rookie and designated cynic, piped up. "Do we really have to meet him? Can't we just send a fruit basket and call it a day?" "Sure," Jareth replied. If basket is code for grenade and fruit is code for high explosive. They moved through the sprawling chaos, the air thick with smog and the distant sound of gunfire. It was a symphony of civilization, or rather, what was left of it. The kind of place that made you appreciate the subtle nuances of an airlock mishap. As they approached the warlord's fortress, a term used loosely, as it appeared to be constructed from equal parts hubris and scrap metal, a group of guards stopped them. They wore mismatched armor that seemed more decorative than functional, and their expressions said they'd rather be doing literally anything else. "State your business," one barked, his voice a register higher than his ego. Jareth flashed a grin that suggested he was either fearless or insane. "We're here for a picnic. Thought this was a good spot for it." The guard wasn't amused. "You're here to see Warlord Grax." "See, Kira," Jareth said, turning to his lieutenant. "Told you we should have brought a fruit basket." They were escorted inside, the fortress interior smelling like burnt ozone and desperation. Warlord Grax awaited them on a throne made of what appeared to be the remnants of various unfortunate spacecraft. He was a mountain of a man, with a face that had seen more bar fights than bars. "Visitors from Earth," he boomed, his voice like gravel gargling nails. "Welcome to my humble abode." "Nice place," Jareth said, resisting the urge to gag on the air. "If you're into post-apocalyptic chic." Grax grinned, showing more teeth than necessary. "I hear you bring news." Jareth nodded, cutting to the chase. "Aliens, Grax. The kind that don't want to exchange cultural recipes." Grax's smile faded. "Ah, the interstellar locusts. Yeah, but worse hygiene." Jareth crossed his arms. "They're coming and they don't take prisoners." The warlord considered this, his fingers drumming on the arm of his throne made from what must have been a ship's hull or a twisted sense of humor. "And you think humans can fight them?" Kira interjected. "Think. Hell, we're counting on it." "No one does desperate like humans," Rook added. "We thrive on it. Seriously, it's kind of our thing." Grax chuckled, a sound like rocks in a blender. "I like your spirit, Earthlings. Perhaps there's hope after all." Jareth wasn't so sure hope was the right word, more like survival by the skin of your teeth. But who was he to argue semantics with a guy who probably flossed with barbed wire? "There's a catch," Jareth said. "We need safe zones, places even the aliens won't touch." "The radiation zones," Grax said, nodding. "Few dare enter but your kind." "We'll make it work," Jareth assured. "We've been drinking Earth water for decades." The warlord considered, then finally nodded. "I will assist. But remember, the Dyson swarm has its own risks." Jareth shrugged as if this was just another Tuesday. "Risks are part of the job description. right under likely to die horribly. With a plan tentatively in place, Jareth and his team left the fortress, the weight of their mission pressing down like the gravity on a neutron star. The future wasn't just grim, it was downright apocalyptic. "Well," Kira said as they trekked back to the portal point. "That went well." Jareth raised an eyebrow. "You've got a funny definition of well." Rook chimed in. "Hey, at least he didn't try to kill us, or feed us to whatever passes for pets around here." "Small victories, Rook," Jareth said. "Small victories." As they prepared to step back through the portal, Jareth took one last glance at the Dyson fragment, a piece of humanity's potential future, as bloody and unpredictable as its past. The portal flickered, a reminder that stability was a luxury they couldn't afford. With a collective breath, the team stepped through, bracing for whatever came next. The return to their ship was less a relief and more a pause in the chaos. The corridors hummed with the familiar sounds of machinery and a crew slowly going mad from too much space and not enough distraction. "All right," Jareth announced once they were back in the relative safety of their command deck. "We've got Grax on board. Now we just need to figure out how to convince the rest of this floating scrap heap's population to join us." Kira leaned against a console, arms crossed. "What if they don't want to be convinced?" "Then we'll just have to make it very persuasive," Jareth replied, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Rook sighed. "Nothing like well-intentioned coercion to win hearts and minds." Jareth chuckled, clapping him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Besides, it's not like they've got many options. The situation was a mess, but it was their mess, and if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was cobbling together victory from the most unlikely of scraps, even if those scraps were orbiting a distant star in a shattered Dyson swarm." "So," Jareth said, turning to his crew, "who's ready to save the universe from certain doom?" Kira shook her head, smiling despite herself. "With you in charge, how could we not be?" Rook rolled his eyes. "I've got a bad feeling about this." "Good," Jareth said, grinning like the madman he was. "Wouldn't want to disappoint." And with that the team set about their tasks, preparing for the battle ahead. Because if there was one thing Jareth knew, it was that in the end, humanity had a knack for surviving the unsurvivable. At least, until the next crisis hit. The Dyson swarm wasn't much of a vacation spot, unless your idea of relaxation involved tripping over ancient tech junk and dodging the occasional laser blast. Captain Jareth and his band of merry survivors found themselves navigating the latest version of Hell on Space as they moved deeper into the fragmented swarm. The goal was simple: gather intel on alien interest in radiation zones and try not to become an interesting statistic in the process. Lieutenant Kira, ever the optimist, kicked a twisted piece of metal that might have been an interstellar dishwasher in a previous life. "You know, Jareth, I think someone should write a travel guide for this place," she said, a dry chuckle in her voice. "Visit the Dyson swarm. Come for the nostalgia of pre-apocalyptic Earth, stay because you're too dead to leave." "Catchy," Jareth replied, scanning the horizon for any sign of hostiles. He'd gotten used to the idea that everything here wanted to kill him. It was practically protocol. But we might need to workshop the title. Something like Death Trap, the series. Private Rook trudged behind them, an aura of irritation clinging to him like the stench of burnt coffee. "I don't get it," he muttered. "All this tech, all these resources, and they couldn't manage better living conditions. At least give us communal showers." "Careful, Rook," Kira said, casting him a sardonic glance. "Keep that line of thinking up and you'll end up running for office." The path ahead was a tangled mess of scrap metal and questionable life choices. They moved quietly, stepping over rocks and debris that whispered stories of long-lost glory days when the Dyson swarm was more than just a playground for cosmic squatters and tyrants. A distant roar of engines cut through the heavy air like an interstellar chainsaw, and a shiver of anticipation twisted through Jareth's gut. "Great," he growled. "Sounds like our welcoming committee." The warlords of the Dyson swarm were a diverse bunch, if your idea of diversity involved various shades of lunacy. Each carved out a niche among the fragments, ruling their tiny kingdoms with the grace of rabid bulldogs. The challenge was picking the least psychotic one to deal with. Unfortunately, Jareth's track record suggested they were about as rare as a functioning morality circuit in a politician's brain. As they crested a ridge of twisted metal, it became clear they were not alone. A motley crew of warlord lackeys draped in second-hand armor and desperate ambitions waited. The leader, a wiry figure with a face that had seen too many close encounters with blunt objects, stepped forward. He had that look in his eye, one that clearly said he was about to ask for either their heads or their cooperation. "Welcome to the residence of Warlord Scrag," the man declared, his voice as oily as a snake's handshake. Jareth managed a grin that was more grin and bear it than friendly. "Nice to meet you. I'll be sure to leave a positive review on Space Trip Advisor." The man smirked, revealing teeth that had long since given up the fight against poor dental hygiene. "Warlord Scrag is interested in your visit. He wants to discuss how you intend to not upset the local status quo." Kira snorted. "Status quo? You mean the chaos, right? Because that's about as status-y and quo-y as it gets around here." Rook piped up, sarcasm dripping from every syllable. "Oh, I don't know, Kira. I think they've got a nice system. You know, anarchy with a side of murder." Figures moved around them, shadows among shadows, and Jareth felt the familiar tingle of paranoia. That sixth sense that warned him trouble was as likely as sunrise, if the sun ever bothered to rise here. "So, where's Scrag?" Jareth asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "I'm itching to meet the man, myth, and probably cautionary tale himself." The lackey's smirk didn't slip. "Follow me." They were led through a maze of rubble and rust, a grim reminder that space wasn't always the final frontier. Sometimes it was just a dumping ground for dreams and delusions. The throne room was more of a throne closet, albeit big enough to house Scrag, his entourage, and what Jareth guessed was last week's lunch. Warlord Scrag was an imposing figure, partly because he was built like a tank that had eaten another tank, and partly because he wielded authority like a bludgeon. His throne was a patchwork of scavenged parts, as though he'd assembled it while blindfolded and angry. He regarded Jareth and his crew with eyes that gleamed under the flickering lights. "Ah, the Earthlings," Scrag boomed, as though he was greeting old friends rather than potential suppliers of headgear. "You've come a long way to die." Jareth leaned against a column that felt less stable than his patience. "Die? Nah, Scrag. We were thinking more along the lines of not die, if that's cool with you." Scrag's laugh was a deep rumble, like a tectonic shift of amusement. "You've got spirit, I like that." "Tell me, why are you really here?" Kira interjected. "We're just sightseeing. Thought we'd check out the local architecture. You know, crumbly chic." Rook nodded. "Yeah, and maybe snag some souvenirs. A few severed heads to remember the trip by, right?" "Yeah, about that," Jareth cut in. "We're here for intel. Word is, aliens have a keen interest in this place. Specifically the radiation zones." Scrag's grin was all predator. "Ah, the zones, dangerous, forbidden. Just the kind of thing ambitious aliens love." "But why?" Jareth pressed, keeping his tone light. "What's so special about them that they'd risk a trip to your charming backyard?" The warlord's eyes narrowed, calculation dancing in their depths. "Those zones hold power, untapped, pure. Whoever controls them controls the future." "Power's nice," Kira said, "but I hear a winning personality and good dental hygiene work wonders too." Scrag chuckled. "I'll take your word for it, Earthling." The conversation teetered on the edge of hostility and camaraderie, much like everything else in the swarm. Information could be as valuable as water in a drought, and Jareth had the feeling they'd have to pay a steep price for whatever crumbs were tossed their way. "We'll make you a deal, Scrag," Jareth said, straightening. "Help us understand the alien interest, and maybe we can help you keep your delightful neighborhood intact." Scrag mulled it over, tapping a thick finger against his chin. "I'll consider it. But you'll need to prove yourselves first. A little task to see if you've got the grit." "Let me guess," Rook said. "You want us to fetch you something or someone?" The warlord's smile was sharp. There's a rival, calls himself Warlord Vex, annoying pest. Remove him from the equation and we'll talk." Jareth sighed inwardly. Warlord politics were about as stable as nitroglycerin at a rave. But if it meant getting their hands on the intel they needed. "Fine," Jareth said. "Consider Vex vexed." With the deal struck, they left Scragg's domain, the sting of impending violence hanging in the air like the promise of rain before a storm. They navigated back through the twisted landscape, silent but for the occasional grumble of metal or the distant echo of artillery fire. "Well, that went better than expected," Kira remarked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "I didn't even have to shoot anyone. Disappointing, really," Rook snorted. "Give it time. I'm sure Vex will provide us with ample opportunity." As they trudged onward, Jareth couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The Dyson swarm was full of eyes, some human, others not. The aliens were out there, lurking, their intentions as clear as mud. Jareth wasn't sure if it was paranoia or instinct, but either way it kept him on edge. "Keep an eye out," he murmured to his team. "Something tells me we're not alone in this junkyard." Kira patted her weapon with affection. "And here I thought we'd skipped on the paranoia package." Rook glanced around, his expression a mix of skepticism and grudging acknowledgement. "Great. More things to worry about. Just what we needed." They approached the territory of Warlord Vex, a patch of the swarm that looked marginally less miserable than Scragg's. Rumor had it Vex was a cunning strategist with a penchant for booby traps and bad poetry. The kind of guy who'd write you a sonnet about your impending doom before blowing you to bits. As they edged closer, the air grew tense, filled with the promise of battle. Jareth motioned for his team to halt, signaling for silence. "Okay," he whispered. "We go in, we do what we have to do, and we get out. Simple." Kira gave him a look. "Simple like brain surgery." "Exactly," Jareth replied, grinning. "Now let's make some new friends." They moved in, stealth mode activated, the hum of their armor barely audible over the distant clamor of the swarm. The terrain was a nightmare of jagged metal and unstable ground, a perfect setting for a showdown with a warlord who probably kept score by the number of skulls on his mantle. The closer they got to Vex's lair, the more Jareth's skin prickled with unease. Shadows flickered at the edge of his vision and he knew they were in for a fight. "Ready?" Jareth asked, his voice low. Kira nodded, weapon at the ready. "Born ready." Rook cracked his knuckles. "Let's get this over with." They advanced, aware that each step brought them closer to the point of no return. In the Dyson swarm, alliances were fickle, life was cheap, and survival was a luxury. But Jareth and his team had one thing on their side: the stubborn, unyielding spirit that defined humanity. As they prepared to face Warlord Vex and whatever surprises he had in store, Jareth couldn't help but smile. After all, it wasn't every day you got to save the universe before lunchtime. The Dyson swarm was a loony bin orbiting a dead star, and Jareth's crew was trying to survive its particular brand of crazy. As they approached Warlord Vex's territory, Kira couldn't help but comment, "This place looks like a Picasso painting of a scrapyard had a love child with a war zone." Jareth smirked. "Pretty sure that's the style the warlords are going for. Brutalism with a splash of PTSD. More of a gut punch of PTSD," Rook muttered, scanning the area for potential threats. "Looks like the aftermath of a robot apocalypse." "Minus the robots." "Don't jinx it," Kira said. "Last thing we need is some old tech waking up and deciding we're today's entertainment." Their armor systems hummed quietly, shields ready to absorb whatever unpleasantness awaited. The Dyson swarm had a reputation for making even the most experienced spacefarers question their career choices. A career in accounting looked positively thrilling by comparison. They moved through a labyrinth of twisted metal, the air thick with the stench of burnt circuits and bad decisions. Paranoia hung over them like a bad smell, and it wasn't just the recycled air. "Vex probably knows we're coming," Jareth said, keeping his tone light. "These warlords seem like the kind of people who subscribe to the Stay Paranoid, Stay Alive newsletter. Makes two of us," Kira replied. "I'm on the mailing list. They reached the heart of Vex's territory, a clearing that screamed trap louder than a carnival barker on payday. Jareth signaled a halt, motioning for his team to stay alert. The place was a mess of makeshift barricades and strategically placed junk, perfect for an ambush. The kind you'd expect to find in a bad war movie, only this wasn't a movie and there were no retakes. "Looks like we're expected," Rook said, nodding towards a shadowy figure standing in the gloom, flanked by heavily armed guards. "And here I was hoping for a surprise party," Jareth quipped. Complete with cake and balloons, the figure stepped forward, revealing a wiry man with eyes that gleamed with the kind of intelligence that suggested he could either be a chess grandmaster or a serial killer. Probably both. "Welcome, travelers," he said with a voice that oozed charm and menace in equal measure. "I am Warlord Vex." "Ah, the infamous Vex. Heard your poetry is to die for," Kira said, her tone less than impressed. "We're big fans of your work," Vex chuckled softly. "I do aim to please, but you're not here to critique my literary pursuits, I imagine. Scraggs sent you, didn't he?" "The old bear never could resist sending others to do his dirty work," Jareth shrugged. "We're just here for a chat. Maybe a little light murder if the mood strikes." "Ah, honesty," Vex said, his smile widening. "Rare in these parts. But before we start slicing each other like Christmas turkey, perhaps we can strike a bargain. I'm a firm believer in diplomacy." "Diplomacy," Rook said, rolling his eyes. "That's a new word for stalling until reinforcements arrive." Ignoring him, Jareth adjusted his stance, tired of this dance already. "What do you propose, Vex?" "I offer you a chance to prove yourselves," Vex replied, a glint in his eye. "Best my champions in a little contest and you'll have my support. Fail and well, we'll just see how good Scraggs' allies really are." "A contest, huh?" Kira said. "What are we talking here? Arm wrestling?" Karaoke. Vex's grin was almost predatory, something a bit more entertaining. "A test of skill and survival instincts. Perfect for guests such as yourselves." Jareth exchanged glances with his crew. They didn't come all this way to play Vex's games, but it seemed they didn't have much choice. At least not one that ended with all their limbs attached. "All right, Vex," Jareth replied. "We'll play your game. But remember, we're not here to put on a show. We want real answers about those radiation zones." Vex nodded, an amused look on his face. "Of course, play well and you'll get your answers. Now come. Let's see if you're as good as Scraggs seems to think." As they followed Vex, Kira remarked, seriously, "What's with these guys and their weird games? You'd think they'd get enough entertainment from the Swarm's daily death lottery." Rook added, "They probably see it as a way to weed out the tourists from the survivors." Jareth chuckled darkly. "Well, we're definitely in the survivor category. Hopefully with a side of winners." The arena, if you could call it that, was a repurposed cargo bay filled with obstacles made of scrap metal and hazard zones, rigged to test the nerves of even the most seasoned warrior. Spectators, a motley assortment of warlord lackeys and cosmic drifters, gathered around, eager for a show. Vex stood on a makeshift platform, gesturing with a flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen and various other entities, welcome. We have a special treat for you today, guests from afar eager to prove their mettle." Jareth sighed. "I hate being the entertainment. Just do what we do best," Kira said, checking her gear. "Adapt, improvise, and generally make them wish they'd stayed home." The first challenge was a gauntlet of traps designed to maim, crush, or otherwise end any unfortunate participant's existence. The kind of thing OSHA would have had a field day with if they ever ventured beyond Earth. "Looks simple enough," Jareth said, eyeing the course. "Just a matter of not dying horribly. Piece of cake," Rook muttered, though the tension in his voice suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. As the horn blared, signaling the start, Jareth and his crew sprinted forward, vaulting over jagged metal and ducking under low-hanging beams. The traps activated with malicious intent, gears whirring and arms swinging with the sole purpose of turning them into crew-shaped pancakes. Kira slid under a swinging blade, popping up on the other side with a grin. "Is that the best you've got, Vex? I've seen scarier amusement parks on Earth." Rook barely sidestepped a flailing chain, his expression one of concentrated irritation. "Remind me to file a complaint with the management." Jareth, meanwhile, navigated the chaos with a blend of agility and sheer bullheaded determination. He was determined to bring back whatever intel he could find, even if it meant playing Vex's twisted game. They reached the end of the gauntlet, breathless but intact. The crowd cheered, a cacophony of admiration tempered with the hope that someone might still explode spectacularly. "Round 1, Vex announced, clapping slowly, goes to our daring guests. I must say you're quite the crowd pleasers." Kira wiped sweat from her brow. "If this is how they entertain themselves, I'd hate to see what they do for a proper party. Probably involves even more sharp objects," Rook replied, deadpan. The next challenge involved a stream of drones programmed to attack with relentless efficiency. A swarm within the swarm. Each drone was equipped with enough firepower to turn an unprepared contestant into a cautionary tale. "Guess they ran out of bears," Jareth quipped, drawing his weapon. As the drones buzzed to life, the crew sprang into action. Jareth's blaster sang a deadly tune, taking down drone after drone. Kira moved with lethal grace, her shots weaving an intricate dance of destruction. Rook, the consummate skeptic, tore through the machines with efficient precision. "They really should have invested in better tech," Kira said, taking out 2 drones with a well-placed shot. "These things are practically antiques, probably got them in a clearance sale," Rook replied, dismantling another drone with cold efficiency. Despite the odds, they held their ground, holding back the tide of metal and circuitry. The drones fell like rain, and Jareth couldn't help but marvel at his team's tenacity. It was the kind of spirit that had kept humanity fighting for centuries, even when the universe itself seemed determined to extinguish them. As the last drone collapsed in a heap of sparking wires, the crowd erupted in applause, their bloodlust sated for the moment. Vex descended from his perch, clapping with genuine enthusiasm. "Remarkable, simply remarkable. I haven't seen such skill in quite some time." "You've earned your place in the annals of the swarm's history." Jareth holstered his weapon, his expression neutral. "We didn't come here to write history, Vex. We're here for answers." Vex nodded, acknowledging the unspoken threat beneath Jareth's words. "Very well. You've proven your worth and you shall have your reward. But first there's something you should see." He led them to a secluded chamber, away from prying eyes. Inside, screens flickered with data and images that told the story of the Dyson swarm and its secrets. "Behold," Vex said, gesturing to the screens, "the radiation zones. The very reason aliens and warlords alike are drawn to this place." Jareth studied the information, his mind racing. The zones were rich with energy, a relic of the swarm's original purpose. Whoever controlled them would wield unimaginable power. "The aliens want this," Jareth said, piecing it together. "That's why they are here. To tap into this energy." "Correct," Vex replied. "They've been testing the swarm's defenses, probing for weaknesses, which means it's only a matter of time before they make a move," Kira said. Rook crossed his arms, considering the implications. "And if that happens, this place will become ground zero in a war none of us signed up for." Jareth nodded, his resolve hardening. "Then we need to stop them. But first, we need to know how they plan to harness this power." Vex studied Jareth, a glint of respect in his eyes. "It seems we share a common goal, Captain. Perhaps together we can prevent the swarm from becoming a battleground." Jareth extended his hand, a silent promise of alliance. "Then let's make sure it doesn't." As they sealed their pact, Jareth couldn't help but marvel at the irony. In a place built on chaos and conflict, they were forging an alliance to preserve its fragile peace. It was a tall order, but if there was one thing humanity excelled at, it was beating the odds even when the universe stacked the deck against them. The Dyson swarm wasn't exactly known for its hospitality, more like a home for cosmic squatters who'd all attended the Charles Manson School of Charm. But now, with the new alliance in place, Captain Jareth felt a tiny smidge of hope clawing its way up through the muck. Of course, hope in the Dyson swarm was about as useful as a chocolate spacesuit. "Reckon Vex will keep his word?" Rook asked. fiddling with his blaster like someone trying to tune a radio that only played static and screams. If he doesn't, I'll personally introduce him to the concept of airlocks, Jareth replied, eyes scanning the flickering holo feed for any signs of treachery or the universe's latest attempt to screw them over. Kira leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, her typical half-smirk plastered on her face. You know, I can't help but feel like we're the unwitting stars of some twisted reality show. Survivor, Junkyard Galaxy, Jareth chuckled, adjusting the fit of his armor. Well, at least we're not getting voted off the planet. Yet, their light banter was cut short by the sound of alarms blaring across the bridge. The kind of sound that usually heralded the arrival of something with too many limbs and an even worse attitude. Guessing that's not the welcome wagon, Rook said, straightening with the kind of grim resignation that comes from too many close encounters with the pointy end of the universe. Recon drones, Kira said, squinting at the holo feed. The screen showed a swarm of small, insect-like machines flitting around with a cockroach's enthusiasm for ruining your day. Looks like our alien friends are stepping up their game. Fantastic, Jareth muttered. Just what we needed. A bunch of flying tasers with a superiority complex. The drones zipped through the Dyson swarm, their purpose clear. Observe, capture, and generally make life as unpleasant as possible for any humans daring to thrive in the radiation zones. We need to take them out before they report back, Jareth said, already formulating a plan. If they get wind of our little alliance, we'll be knee-deep in alien invaders faster than you can say bad idea, Kira nodded. So, what's the plan? Hope they die of boredom, more like death by overconfidence, Jareth replied. Rook, get your scanner working. Let's see if we can jam their signals. Rook grumbled something about the universe's sixth sense of humor and got to work. Meanwhile, Jareth and Kira prepared to head out, ready to play exterminator to the galaxy's least welcome pests. They navigated through the rusty corridors of the Dyson swarm, each shadow a potential threat, each creak a reminder of their precarious position. The swarm had a way of making even the bravest feel like ants under a magnifying glass, which, given their current predicament, wasn't far off the mark. As they reached a vantage point overlooking the drone's flight path, Kira set up a makeshift turret from pieces of scavenged tech. Think we can take them all down before they call for backup, if we're lucky, Jareth replied, taking aim with his blaster. And if we're not, well, at least we'll go out in a blaze of irony. Always the optimist, Kira said, rolling her eyes. The drones buzzed closer, oblivious to the danger lurking in the shadows. Jareth and Kira opened fire, their weapons lighting up the dim corridors with bursts of energy. The drones, caught off guard by the sudden assault, scattered like startled insects, some exploding in showers of sparks. One by one the drones fell, their twisted remains littering the floor. But the victory was short-lived as a larger, more ominous drone emerged, sleek and deadly, with a payload that suggested it wasn't there for the sightseeing. Great, Kira said. They've sent in the cavalry. Just what we needed, Jareth said through gritted teeth. A flying tank with delusions of grandeur. The drone unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, forcing the pair to take cover behind a makeshift barricade of scrap metal. Each impact sent shudders through their cover, a reminder that the universe, like a bored cat, could turn on them at any moment. Rook, any luck with that jammer? Jareth shouted into his comm, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. Working on it, Rook replied, his voice crackling over the static. This thing's as stubborn as a Martian sandstorm. Great, so we're on our own for now, Kira said, her tone laced with sarcasm. Just like old times, Jareth nodded, formulating a plan. All right, we need to take out that drone before it calls in reinforcements. Think you can give me a distraction? Kira grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. Always happy to cause a little chaos. While Jareth readied his weapon, Kira darted from cover, drawing the drone's attention with a series of rapid shots. The drone shifted its focus, its sensors whirring as it recalculated the threat. Jareth seized the opportunity, darting from his position, and landing a direct hit on the drone's exposed underbelly. The machine shuddered, its system sparking and failing before crashing to the ground in a heap of twisted metal. "Nice shot," Kira said, returning to his side. "Now let's hope that was the last of them." Their victory, however, was tempered by the realization that this was merely the opening act in what promised to be a much larger confrontation. Back on the ship, Rook finally managed to get the jamming system online. "All right, I think I've got it," he said, sweat beading on his forehead as he adjusted the controls. "We've got a temporary window, but it won't last long." "Good work," Jareth said. "Let's use it while we can." Time to go on the offensive. With Vex's information in hand and the temporary jamming field offering some breathing room, the crew convened to plot their next move. The aliens' interest in the radiation zones was a problem that needed a solution, and fast. "We need to find out how they're planning to tap into the swarm's energy," Jareth said, pacing the cramped control room. "If they succeed, we're all toast." "Yeah, and not the nice, crispy kind," Kira added. "So, what's the plan?" Rook asked, leaning against the console. "Storm their base and ask nicely." "Something like that," Jareth replied. "We'll need to infiltrate their operations, gather intel, and get out before everything goes to hell." "Sounds like a typical Tuesday," Kira quipped. "Count me in." Rook, however, wasn't convinced. "You sure we can trust Vex? He seems like the type who'd sell us out for a shiny new blaster." Jareth paused, considering the question. Trust in the Dyson swarm was about as common as a warm greeting from a black hole, but they had little choice. "I don't trust him, but I trust that he wants to keep his territory intact," Jareth replied. "His goals align with Ayur's for now, but we keep our eyes open." The plan was set, the stakes impossibly high. But if they were to prevent a full-scale invasion, they'd have to walk a razor's edge between success and catastrophe. As the crew made their preparations, the weight of the task ahead settled over them like a suffocating fog. The Dyson swarm was a place of madness and ambition, and they were about to dive headfirst into its darkest corners. Jareth glanced at his crew, their faces a mix of determination and trepidation. They were a ragtag bunch held together by a stubbornness that bordered on stupidity. But they were his ragtag bunch, and together they'd face whatever the swarm threw their way. "All right," Jareth said, his voice steady. "Let's show these aliens what happens when you mess with Earth's most stubborn." Kira grinned. "And if that doesn't work, we can always revert to Plan B." "Which is?" Rook asked, though he had a feeling he knew the answer. "Run like hell," Kira replied, her laugh echoing through the corridors. With the plan in motion, the crew embarked on their mission, a dangerous dance of stealth and strategy that would test their limits. The Dyson swarm loomed around them, its shifting shadows a constant reminder of the chaos that reigned within. Their path took them deep into the swarm's twisted corridors, where the air was thick with the scent of rust and desperation. The alien facility wasn't far, a hive of activity as the invaders worked tirelessly to unravel the swarm's secrets. "Looks like they've got a full house," Kira whispered, peering around a corner at the bustling operation. "What's the play, Captain?" Jareth considered their options, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. "We need to get inside, access their data, and get out before they notice we're here." "Rook, think you can hack their systems?" Rook shrugged, his expression one of feigned nonchalance. "If their security is as bad as their drone's aim, shouldn't be a problem." With their roles established, the team moved with purpose, weaving through the facility's corridors with the practiced stealth of those accustomed to walking the knife's edge. Each step was a gamble, each shadow a potential threat. Jareth led the way, his senses honed to a razor's edge as they approached the facility's command center. The door loomed before them, a barrier between them and the information they desperately needed. "Let's do this," Jareth said, nodding to Rook. Rook approached the console, his fingers dancing over the controls with the precision of a surgeon. The door hissed open, revealing a room filled with screens and consoles, each one a potential goldmine of information. The crew moved swiftly, each member playing their part in the unfolding drama. Kira kept watch, her blaster ready, while Jareth and Rook dove into the sea of data, searching for the answers they needed. Their hearts pounded in their chests, each second a ticking time bomb as they worked to outpace the inevitable discovery. But Jareth's resolve was unshakable. He wouldn't leave until they had what they came for. Finally, Rook let out a triumphant breath. Got it. All the data on their operations, their plans to tap into the swarm's energy. Everything. Time to get the hell out of Dodge, Jareth said, a determined grin spreading across his face. With their prize secured, the crew made their escape, slipping through the facility with the kind of reckless abandon that only comes when the stakes are impossibly high and the odds laughably low. As they exited the facility, alarms blaring in their wake, Jareth couldn't help but chuckle. Why is it always alarms with these guys? You'd think they'd try something more subtle, Kira grinned, her adrenaline-fueled excitement infectious. Subtlety's not really their style, is it? The run back to their ship was a frantic race against time, each step a reminder of the danger they'd embraced in pursuit of their goal. But as the Dyson swarm loomed around them, a twisted testament to humanity's indomitable spirit, Jareth knew they'd rise to the challenge. They reached the ship, breathless but victorious, the data secure and the first steps of their plan a success. But as they prepared to share their findings with Vex, a new challenge awaited them, the fragile trust within their own ranks. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, the pressure of the mission threatening to fracture their unity. But Jareth was determined to keep them together, to see the mission through to the end, even if it meant walking a tightrope over the abyss. And as the ship hurtled through the Dyson swarm, its course set for Vex's territory, Jareth knew the real battle was just beginning. The stakes were higher than ever, the threat of alien invasion looming large. But with their new alliance and the tenacity that defined them, they'd face whatever came next. In the Dyson swarm, survival wasn't just a skill, it was an art. And Jareth and his crew were about to paint their masterpiece. The Dyson swarm was beginning to feel like a death trap designed by a sadistic game show host. With their data download successful, the team had planned a quiet return to Vex. But of course, the universe had other ideas, like a toddler with a hammer and a penchant for smashing dreams. Ship's shields are down to 50%, Captain, Kira announced over the screech of alarms, her voice barely masking the incredulous laughter bubbling beneath. Guess they didn't like us borrowing their stuff, Jareth grimaced, wrestling with the controls like they were a particularly temperamental bull. Just another lovely day in the swarm. Rook, any chance you can get us more juice? Rook, who'd had better days that didn't involve alien forces trying to turn him into cosmic dust, was furiously tapping away at his console. If by juice you mean not getting blown up, then it's a hard maybe. The ship lurched violently, throwing everyone into a chorus of curses that would have made a sailor proud. The alien fighters were relentless, and despite their best efforts, the crew was outmatched, outgunned, and out of luck. We need to jump to warp, Kira suggested, her voice tinged with a madness that only desperation could bring out. Preferably before we're space glitter, Jareth slammed his fist against the console. Warp's off the table. They've got some kind of dampening field up. Oh, great, Rook groaned. It's like they planned for us to be idiots. Enough with the self-pity, Rook, Jareth snapped. Focus on keeping us in one piece. Just as the words left his mouth, a blinding flash filled the bridge and their world turned upside down. The ship shuddered to a halt, the lights flickering out, leaving them in a shadowy limbo. When consciousness returned, Jareth found himself staring at the ceiling. Well, that didn't go as planned. Understatement of the millennium, Kira mumbled from somewhere nearby, her voice a blend of sarcasm and grogginess. They've been captured, dragged into the belly of the beast with all the finesse of a drunk pilot on a bender. Jareth's head throbbed in time with the pulsing lights, each one a reminder of how royally they'd screwed up. As his vision cleared, he saw Rook sitting up, looking more annoyed than injured. So, anyone else feel like they've been run over by a starship? Just a typical Tuesday, Kira replied, echoing Jareth's earlier sarcasm. The alien holding cell was a masterpiece of utilitarian design, all the charm of a prison cell, but with the added bonus of existential dread. The walls were an oppressive gray, and the air had that recycled tang of a doomed submarine. Well, at least they didn't go for the cliché of force fields, Rook noted, gesturing at the solid metal bars that separated them from the corridor beyond. Guess even aliens have a budget. Jareth leaned against the bars, peering down the corridor. We need to figure out a way out of here, assuming they didn't confiscate our belongings, which, knowing our luck, they probably did, Kira said. As they assessed their situation, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed closer. Their captor appeared, a towering figure with a face that looked like it had been sculpted by someone who'd only ever seen humans through a funhouse mirror. "Welcome to your new home," the alien said, its voice a low rumble. "I hope you find it accommodating. Room service would be nice," Kira quipped. "And maybe a mint on the pillow." The alien's eyes narrowed, which Jareth took as a sign that humor wasn't universal. "You will remain here until we decide your fate. Do not attempt to escape." With that, their captor moved on, leaving them to stew in their own juices, metaphorically speaking, though with the way things were going, literal stew wasn't out of the question. "So what's plan B?" Rook asked, casting a sideways glance at Jareth. Jareth sighed. "First, we figure out if we have any allies in here. If we're lucky, someone might hate these aliens more than they hate us." "If we're lucky," Kira echoed, her tone dripping with skepticism. "This place doesn't exactly scream friendly neighborhood watch." It was then they heard it, a whisper, barely audible from the cell next to theirs. "Hey, Earthlings." Jareth turned his head, trying to locate the source of the voice. "Who's there? Name's Dre," came the reply, and a face appeared between the bars. It was human, or close enough, though with skin that shimmered oddly, as if it had absorbed some of the radiation from the swarm. "Looks like you folks could use a hand." Dre's grin was wry, and despite their predicament, Jareth felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. "You could say that. What's your story?" "Science experiment gone wrong," Dre replied, shrugging. "Long story short, ended up here before I could say ethical oversight, and you've survived in this radiation." Rook asked, intrigued despite himself. "Adapted, more like. Radiation's a harsh mistress, but she's got a way of toughening you up." Kira raised an eyebrow. "So any chance you've got a way out of here?" "Funny you should ask," Dre replied, his grin widening. "Been working on a little something. Just need the right timing and a bit of distraction." "Distraction we can do," Jareth said, exchanging a glance with his crew. "What do you need?" "Anything that goes boom," Dre replied, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "They've got all kinds of goodies stored nearby. Just need to get my hands on them." Rook chuckled darkly. "Booms we can do. Always knew those baskets would come in handy. We create a ruckus, you grab what you need, and we all get out of here," Kira asked. "That's the plan," Dre agreed. "Assuming we don't blow ourselves up in the process." "Sounds like Thursday," Jareth said, smirking despite himself. With a tentative alliance formed and a plan taking shape, the crew set about preparing for what could be their last stand, or their ticket to freedom. The stakes were higher than ever, but if they could pull off this escape, they'd have more than just survival to celebrate. They'd have a fighting chance against the swarm. And so, with a mixture of gallows humor and grim determination, the crew readied themselves for the chaos to come. After all, in the Dyson swarm, madness was just the prelude to innovation. "All right, let's show them what happens when you mess with humanity's finest." "Finest?" Kira snorted. "More like the most stubborn." "Potato, potato," Rook said with a shrug. "Let's just make sure we end up on the right side of the explosion." As the footsteps of the guards approached once more, the crew readied themselves, hearts pounding, adrenaline surging, and with a prayer to whatever cosmic forces bothered to listen that they'd pull off the impossible. The guards never knew what hit them. One moment, they were patrolling the corridor, and the next, they were on the receiving end of a full-blown riot. Jareth, Kira, and Rook sprang into action, taking advantage of the element of surprise that only sheer human audacity could provide. As fists flew and chaos erupted, Dre slipped into the shadows like a ghost, moving with the kind of stealth that comes from years of practice or sheer desperation. The hidden cache was exactly where he expected, and within moments, he'd liberated enough explosive ordnance to start a second Big Bang. "Got the goods," Dre shouted, rejoining the fray with a manic grin. "Time to blow this joint," literally, Jareth said as they made a break for it, the sound of explosions and alarms painting a symphony of impending doom. The corridors became a blur, the pounding of their hearts matching the rhythm of their footfalls. The facility shook with the force of their escape, each detonation a reminder of both the cost of their failure and the potential of their success. As they reached the ship, battered but free, Jareth was once again reminded of why he'd chosen this life. It wasn't the thrill of the fight, nor the promise of glory. It was the people beside him, their tenacity, their grit, their refusal to go quietly into that good night. "Let's get the hell out of here," he said, voice grim yet filled with determination. With the ship's engines roaring to life, they left the alien facility behind, the Dyson swarm swallowing their path in a cloak of shadows and stars. Their escape was by no means the end, merely a new beginning fraught with dangers, challenges, and the kind of insanity that could only be found on the fringes of known space. But as they flew into the void, Jareth couldn't suppress a grin. "Does this mean we're now wanted intergalactic fugitives?" Rook asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Probably," Kira replied with a shrug. "But isn't that part of the charm?" And so, with their newfound allies and a swelling sense of purpose, they set their sights on the horizon, undeterred by the odds, ready to face whatever came next in the ever-turning wheel of cosmic fate. Because in the Dyson swarm, survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about living on your own terms, consequences be damned. When you find yourself in a damp, alien facility, trying to figure out how not to become part of the decor, you can count on the universe to throw you a curveball. Captain Jareth knew this all too well as he stared at the flickering holo feed. He couldn't tell if the device was trying to warn them of impending doom, or if it was just having a midlife crisis. Probably both. "So any chance that thing's having a vision of our glorious future?" Kira asked, her voice drier than a Martian sandstorm. "If by glorious future you mean being reduced to atoms, then yeah, it's spot on." Jareth replied, trying to sift through the useless data. "Typical. Even alien tech has got a taste for the melodramatic," Rook chimed in, still nursing a bruise from their earlier escape escapades. The room they were in now was no better than the cell, but at least it didn't come with complimentary shackles. It did, however, come with an extra dose of existential dread, courtesy of the psychedelic glowing symbols etched into the walls. They were either ancient alien art or the cosmic equivalent of bathroom graffiti. Jareth was betting on the latter. As Jareth fiddled with the holo feed, his focus wavered on the bizarre bio readings it had picked up. His eyes narrowed at an anomaly, something distinctly human, which was odd because, as far as he knew, their captors weren't exactly rolling out the red carpet for any Terran tourists. "Well, isn't that interesting?" Jareth muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "What's got your attention, Captain?" Kira asked, peering over his shoulder. "This feed's picking up biosignatures. Human ones, but they're all sorts of screwed up. Like how screwed up?" Rook asked, reluctantly intrigued. "Like genetically modified science experiment gone wrong levels of screwed up. But there's something else. They are resistant to the swarm's radiation." That bit of news landed like a bomb. If the Dyson swarm was a junkyard hellhole, then this was the nugget of gold buried underneath a mountain of trash. "So you're saying we've got mutant allies?" Rook asked, eyebrow raised in what could have been skepticism or hope. "Likely both. Potentially. If we can find them and convince them not to eat us," Jareth said, smirking. "Great, just what we need." "Mutant diplomacy," Kira quipped, rolling her eyes. "If they are immune, maybe there's something in their biology we can use," Jareth said, the cogs in his brain turning with the speed of impending genius or disaster. Hard to tell. And how do we convince them to play nice? Rook asked, already anticipating the worst. Jareth shrugged. Everyone's got a price or a vendetta. We just need to find theirs. Kira nodded, a spark of excitement, or was it madness, in her eyes. We've got to reach them first. Let's hope they're not too keen on dissecting trespassers. As the trio plotted their next move, another alarm blared through the facility, a sound that had become as familiar as Rook's grumbling. The universe, ever the prankster, wasn't about to let them off easy. Looks like we've overstayed our welcome, Jareth said, motioning for them to move. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors, ducking under low-hanging cables and avoiding the occasional security patrol. The air was thick with tension, and more than a hint of ozone, like someone had tried to microwave the atmosphere. When they finally reached the section where the strange biosignatures were strongest, the lights flickered, revealing a chamber that looked more like a mad scientist's lab than a place of refuge. The mutants were there, all right, half a dozen of them, sporting body modifications that were equal parts impressive and terrifying. "Welcome, travelers," said a figure stepping forward, their voice echoing ominously in the chamber. "Care for a tour of our humble abode?" Jareth stepped forward, trying to exude confidence rather than the mild panic he felt gnawing at his sanity. "We're not here for the tourist traps, just looking for a mutual benefit, something that doesn't involve us on a dissection table." The mutant leader chuckled, a disconcerting sound that was more metallic than human. "We might be able to accommodate that. But why should we help you? Because we're not fans of the guys upstairs either. And we might just have a plan to take them down a peg or two," Jareth said. "Bold claim, human, but we are listening. There's something in your biology, something that lets you survive this radiation. We believe it might tip the balance in our favor. Help us, and we'll make sure those tyrants never hurt anyone again." The mutant leader eyed Jareth, their expression unreadable. "And in return, you get the credit for taking down a powerful enemy. And maybe a more peaceful life after all this chaos." The leader considered this, their modified eyes glowing in the dim light. "You speak with conviction, Captain. Very well, but we will need more than words. Actions speak louder. Trust me," Jareth replied. "If there's one thing we're good at, it's action." With a nod, the alliance was struck. The mutants, as it turned out, had been planning their own rebellion. They were eager to play their part, particularly if it meant freedom from their subterranean plight. As they worked together, the plan solidified. Rig the facility's power core to overload, using the mutants' unique tolerance to the radiation to gather resources others couldn't. Meanwhile, Jareth and his crew would handle the sabotage, a task that Jareth was beginning to think he was born for, given how often he was forced into it. "Never thought I'd see the day I'd work with mutants," Rook murmured, watching them work with an uneasy mix of awe and trepidation. "Desperate times, desperate measures," Kira replied, never one to miss a beat. "And hey, if we pull this off," Jareth added, "we'll be the hottest topic in the Dyson swarm. Everyone loves a good underdog story, or a suicide mission, depending on how things turned out." But optimism, however misguided, was a rare commodity in the swarm, and Jareth figured they could afford to indulge, just this once. The plan was set in motion with the kind of precision that would make a surgeon jealous or a demolition expert proud. As the mutants gathered the necessary components, Jareth and his crew prepared to breach the core, a task that sounded far more exciting and far less deadly in theory. As they moved through the facility, the weight of their mission pressed down like a gravity field set to crush. But with each step, Jareth felt a strange sense of calm, as if the universe was holding its breath alongside him. "Let's do this," he said, nodding to his team as they reached the power core's access point. The mutants had given them a way in, a path through maintenance tunnels that the aliens hadn't bothered to secure. It was tight, dark, and smelled like despair, but it was better than the alternative. "Lovely place they've got here," Kira said, crawling through the tunnel with the grace of a cat burglar who'd taken a wrong turn. "At least it's not another cell," Rook added, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Reaching the end of the tunnel, they found themselves in the core's heart, a massive room pulsing with energy, wires snaking across the floor like cybernetic vines. "All right, we're in," Jareth announced, his voice barely audible over the hum of the machinery. "Let's make this count," Rook replied, setting to work on the sabotage. As they planted the charges, Rook couldn't resist throwing a glance at Jareth. "This isn't going to blow us to hell with it, right? Not if we don't screw up the timing," Jareth said, grinning despite himself. With everything in place, they backtracked through the tunnels, each passing second a reminder of how quickly things could go south if they didn't hustle. Back at the mutants' chamber, the leader waited with a look of grim determination. "It is done, yeah," Jareth replied. "Now we just need to set it off." As they prepared to make their move, the alarms blared once more. This time, however, Jareth felt a rush of exhilaration. They were no longer the prey but the hunters, ready to unleash chaos upon their captors. The mutants, for their part, moved with swift efficiency, their modifications allowing them to navigate the facility's traps with ease. The sight of them in action was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, a reminder that they were more than the sum of their parts. As they neared the exit, the sound of running footsteps reached their ears, along with the unmistakable hum of alien weapons. Their captors had finally caught on. "Time to give them a farewell they won't forget," Kira said, readying her weapon. Rook nodded. "I've always wanted to be the star of an explosive send-off." With a shared nod, Jareth triggered the charges. The facility trembled, the power cores overload sending a shockwave through the structure. Alarms blared, walls cracked, and chaos reigned. The mutants led the charge through the corridors, Jareth and his crew hot on their heels. They fought their way to the ship, the path of their escape marked by the smoldering remains of their captors. As they boarded the ship, Jareth couldn't help but glance back at the burning wreckage of the facility. It was a sight to behold, the culmination of their reckless audacity and sheer refusal to surrender. "Let's get out of here," he said, sealing the hatch as the mutants settled into the makeshift space they'd cleared for their new allies. The ship roared to life, engines flaring as they burst free of the facility's remains. As they hurtled through the void, the realization of their success began to sink in. "We did it," Rook said, disbelief and pride mingling in his voice. "Damn right we did," Kira replied, her expression one of pure satisfaction. Jareth allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph. They'd not only escaped but struck a blow against their captors, a reminder that humanity, even on the fringes of the cosmos, was not to be underestimated. As they slipped through the Dyson swarm, the future uncertain but filled with possibility, Jareth knew one thing for certain: they were far from finished. This was just the beginning of their fight, a fight they intended to win, no matter the cost. And with a crew like this, he wouldn't have it any other way. The ship groaned and creaked like an ancient whale on its last journey, struggling to haul itself through the Dyson swarm. Jareth sat in the captain's chair, his fingers dancing over the flickering holo feed with the grace of someone who wasn't quite sure if he was fixing it or making it worse. The ship felt like an extension of himself, grumpy, battered, and held together by sheer stubbornness. "How's the ship holding up, Captain?" Kira asked, striding into the cockpit with her usual energy, as if the universe hadn't just tried to obliterate them. "Like a house of cards in a hurricane," Jareth replied, glancing at the instrument panel that beeped in protest. "But it's our house of cards and we're not folding yet." Kira grinned, plopping down into the seat beside him. "You really know how to inspire, don't you?" Jareth smirked, adjusting the ship's course. "Inspiration's overrated. Pure, unadulterated panic tends to get the job done just fine." Meanwhile, Rook was busy playing the verbal equivalent of dodgeball with the mutants. They'd found their space on the ship, a ragtag bunch of genetic anomalies, and were now trying to fit into the cramped quarters like sardines in a very unyielding tin can. Rook leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, watching the mutants who were now part of their merry band of misfits. "So, you guys enjoy the ambience?" This ship's got all the charm of a coffin with a nice view. The mutant leader, who went by the charming name of Glitch, a nod to his peculiar habit of spasming when stressed, grunted. Seen worse. At least this one doesn't smell like death and betrayal. Yet, Rook quipped, raising an eyebrow. Give it time. Glitch gave a metallic chuckle, a sound that would have been unsettling if Jareth wasn't already used to the ship's noises threatening to drown them out. We might survive this yet, human. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alert, a proximity warning blaring throughout the ship like an air raid siren on caffeine. We've got company, Kira noted, peering at the holo feed. And they're not bringing cookies. Jareth spun to face the screen. Alien patrols, because of course they'd come back for more. Think they are angry about us blowing up their favorite facility, Rook said, joining them in the cockpit. Angry? Nah, they're probably just here to return our lost luggage, Jareth responded dryly. Kira, get to the weapons controls. Rook, I need you to handle the shields. I'm on it, Kira said, moving with the kind of efficiency that suggested she'd done this all too many times before. Her fingers flew over the console, bringing the ship's modest armaments online. Rook, meanwhile, was doing his best to coax their shields into something other than paper thin. Come on, you overgrown toaster, he muttered at the controls, as if sweet-talking might convince them to work. The proximity alert had resolved into a trio of alien ships, sleek and menacing, the kind that screamed "we'll kill you" and look good doing it. They emerged from the swirl of cosmic debris like sharks circling a wounded seal. Battle stations it is, Jareth announced, hitting the ship-wide intercom. All hands ready, whatever hands we can spare anyway. The mutants had wasted no time, scrambling to their own stations with the grace and determination of beings who'd spent a lifetime surviving against impossible odds. Glitch was coordinating them, his voice a calm anchor amidst the chaos. Think we can take them? Kira asked, already plotting firing arcs and attack vectors. Do we have a choice? Jareth replied. Remember, if you can see the other side, it definitely wants to kill us. Lovely policy, Rook commented, his own fingers dancing over the shield controls. Hope you've got a damn good backup plan, Captain. Backup plan, Jareth grinned, eyes locked on the incoming hostiles. My plan's to win, or at least die spectacularly trying. The first volley of shots lit up the space between them like a deadly fireworks display. The ship rocked with the impact, systems flaring and flickering in protest. Shields holding at, well, barely would be generous, Rook called out, his tone only half joking. Keep those hits coming, and we'll be a pretty space debris art installation. Kira returned fire with a precision that made Jareth glad she was on their side. The ship's modest armament spat bolts of energy back at their attackers, a David and Goliath scenario with way too many Goliaths. Keep it steady, Jareth shouted over the chaos. Remember, this ship's got more lives than a stray cat. Kira just laughed, her voice carrying a note of grim delight, and about as much hygiene. The aliens were pressing hard, their tactics relentless, a constant barrage that tested the limits of their already battered ship. It was a losing battle on paper, but Jareth had never put much stock in statistics. Time for Plan B, Jareth shouted, adjusting their trajectory with a jerk of the controls. We head straight into the debris field. Give them something else to worry about. Rook looked at him as though he'd lost his mind, which, in fairness, was a distinct possibility. You do know that's a death trap, right? Jareth just grinned. Exactly. They won't expect us to be that stupid. And here I thought we were the desperate ones, Kira quipped, holding onto her console as Jareth directed them into the swirling chaos of wreckage and misplaced celestial garbage. The ship plunged into the debris field, skirting dangerously close to twisted metal and floating chunks of ships long lost to the void. It was a madman's gambit, relying on their intimate familiarity with chaos to keep them one step ahead. Jareth kept the controls tight, his nerves wound like a spring ready to snap. The ship weaved and ducked, the alien ships trying to follow but struggling to maintain their pursuit in the unpredictable terrain. Looks like they're having trouble keeping up, Rook observed, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Probably cursing our reckless souls, Kira added, a satisfied gleam in her eye. Let's give them a taste of their own medicine. With practiced skill, she unleashed another volley, the blasts ricocheting through the debris and catching one of the alien ship's broadside. It spiraled off course, a testament to the universe's sense of humor. One down, two to go, Jareth said, steering them through the chaos with grim determination. The remaining ships were close behind, their weapons still singing through the void, but Jareth could feel the tide turning. The debris field was their ally, an unpredictable dance partner that favored the bold. Kira and Rook worked in tandem, a blur of motion as they kept the ship both alive and fighting. It was a delicate balance between offense and defense, survival and victory. The occasional sarcastic comment helped lighten the tension, or at least distracted them from the grim reality of their situation. "Think they've figured out we're too dumb to die?" Rook asked, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Probably just trying to decide if they should be impressed or horrified," Kira replied, eyes locked on her console. The ship shuddered as another volley found its mark, but Jareth pushed them through, eyes scanning for any opening, any weakness to exploit. And then he saw it, a glint amidst the chaos, an opportunity wrapped in danger. "There," he said, pointing it out to Kira. "If we can get them to follow us through that cluster." Kira glanced at the screen, calculating the risk. "Got it. Hold on to your butts, folks." With a deftness that belied the ship's battered state, Jareth maneuvered them towards the cluster, a dense mass of wreckage that promised salvation or a new graveyard. The alien ships, determined or perhaps just as reckless, followed in their wake, their weapons still blazing. But here, amidst the tangled remains of past battles, the odds shifted. Kira timed it perfectly, unleashing a barrage that sent debris cascading through the void like a deadly game of pinball. The alien pilots, forced to adjust course, found themselves caught in a trap of their own making. The first ship clipped a drifting hull, careening off course into a shower of fragmented metal. The second tried to swerve, but Kira's well-placed shots ensured their demise, the ship erupting in a brilliant flash of light. "And that's game," Jareth said, watching the remaining fragments drift away. His heart was racing, a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. Rook let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "I can't believe we pulled that off." "You can thank my charming personality," Jareth replied, adjusting their course back to safer territory. "And maybe a bit of dumb luck." Kira leaned back in her seat, a well-earned grin on her face. "Yeah, well, next time let's skip the heart attack material, all right." Jareth chuckled, the sound more relief than amusement. "I'll see what I can do." But let's be honest, what's a day in the swarm without a brush with death? With the immediate threat past, they set their course for the rendezvous point, where they hoped to regroup and plan their next move against the alien forces. The victory was a small one, but in the grand scheme of things it felt monumental. Their ragtag crew, humans and mutants alike, had not only survived but thrived in the chaos. And as Jareth settled back into his chair, he allowed himself a moment of optimism, a dangerous, intoxicating feeling in a place like the Dyson Swarm. But for now, it was a victory, a reminder that even in the darkest of places, there was still light to be found. And in this grim corner of the galaxy, Jareth was determined to find more of it. In the aftermath of their impromptu fireworks show, the ship cruised through the debris field like a victorious underdog limping across the finish line. Captain Jareth leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. It wasn't every day you outsmarted the galaxy's equivalent of a fashion-conscious death squad. Then again, in the Dyson Swarm, days tended to blur between miraculously survived and barely survived. "Well, that was fun," Kira said, her voice dripping with the kind of sarcasm that could peel paint. "Do I get a trophy now or just a pat on the back and another existential crisis?" "How about a new assignment?" Jareth replied, his tone as dry as a Martian desert. "We've got a meet and greet with Warlord Vex to plan, And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to schmooze with a guy who decorates with severed heads? Rook snorted, still coaxing the shields back to something resembling functional. If it's all the same, I'd rather jump out the nearest airlock. Less risk of losing my head, literally. Come on, Rook. Where's your sense of adventure? Kira tossed him a lazy grin. Though I admit, calling this whole thing a negotiation is like calling a black hole a moderately heavy object. Nothing ventured, nothing exploded, Jareth said, adjusting their course toward Vex's territory. The ship groaned in protest, every creak a reminder of its age. Let's just hope the universe's sense of humor doesn't decide to make us the punchline again. As they neared the chaotic sprawl of Vex's domain, the scenery shifted from cosmic junkyard to post-apocalyptic art installation. Makeshift barricades and twisted metal sculptures lined their path, each piece a testament to a madman's aesthetic. It was like Vex had taken a look at the universe and decided to double down on chaos. "Look at all this," Rook mumbled, peering out the blistered viewport. "It's like someone let a pack of cosmic raccoons loose." "That's Vex for you," Kira said, her fingers tapping a restless rhythm on her console. "The guy's got more territory here than common sense." Though considering the company, that's not saying much. "Hey, he's a warlord," Jareth said, his grin crooked. "They don't exactly hand out IQ tests with the job application." As if on cue, the ship's comms crackled to life, a voice as gravelly as asteroid dust filling the cabin. "Incoming vessel, identify yourself or prepare to be disassembled for parts." "We've been short on scrap lately and you look like you're just our type." Jareth leaned forward, toggling the response with a casual flick. "This is Captain Jareth of the SS. Are we still alive? We're here to see Warlord Vex. Heard there's a lovely tete-a-tete he'd like to have with us." The response was a low chuckle, the kind that made you check your drink for poison. "Welcome to the neighborhood, Captain. Follow the beacon and try not to hit anything vital. We just cleaned up after the last visitors." The line went dead, and Jareth guided the ship deeper into Vex's territory, the path marked by sporadic flashes of light reflecting off rusted metal. It was the kind of place where hope came to die, only to be resurrected as a slightly deranged version of itself. Perfect for negotiations. The landing was smoother than Jareth had expected, though he had long since learned not to trust appearances. The air outside was thick with tension and the acrid smell of old fires, just the kind of welcoming atmosphere that screamed potential ambush. "All right, team," Jareth said, rising from his seat. "Let's go make friends. Or enemies. Whoever shoots first, really." As they stepped onto the makeshift platform, a group of armed guards greeted them, their mismatched armor giving them the appearance of children who'd raided a military surplus store. At their head was Warlord Vex, a towering figure with the kind of face that suggested he regularly used it to stop speeding vehicles. "Captain Jareth," Vex said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "I've heard a lot about you, mostly curses, but hey, any publicity is good publicity, right?" "That's what my agent tells me," Jareth replied, his grin unfazed. "Though I'm not sure if wanted criminal counts as a glowing endorsement." Vex let out a booming laugh, the sound echoing through the rusted corridors. "I like you, Jareth. You've got balls. Tiny, scrappy ones, but still. And you've got a charming sense of decor," Kira chimed in, eyeing a particularly grotesque sculpture. "I see you favor the post-apocalyptic carnival theme." "Helps with the ambience," Vex said, a wicked glint in his eye. "Now, shall we discuss business, or do you want to keep trading barbs?" "Let's get to it," Jareth said, gesturing toward a warped metal door that likely led to Vex's war room, or his personal pit of despair. "We've got a galaxy to not die in." Inside, the war room was a clutter of maps and monitors, each displaying various sectors of the Dyson swarm. It was chaos distilled into a tactical layout, the kind of place that made you wonder if organizational skills were just a myth. "So, about those aliens breathing down our necks," Jareth began, leaning over the map. "They're not exactly the neighborly type, and we'd rather not be their next meal." "Ah, yes," Vex said, folding his arms. The aliens. They came in making demands and blowing things up. Took a liking to some of our more exotic resources, but not everyone's keen to play pet to their whims. Guess they don't play well with others, Rook added, glancing at a monitor that displayed the remnants of their earlier skirmish. They're a bit like me in that regard, Vex admitted, a sly smile creeping across his face. Only I don't have a dampening field and an ego the size of a planet. So here's the deal, Jareth said, his tone turning serious. We help you deal with these alien bastards. In return, you support us. Maybe even work together to ensure we aren't squashed like bugs under their shiny boots. Vex considered for a moment, the silence stretching like ancient elastic. You got guts, Captain. And I appreciate a man who knows how to handle himself in a firefight. So all right, I'll bite. We join forces, make these long-necked freaks regret crashing our party. Jareth felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a promise of salvation, but it was a start. A foothold in a universe that seemed hell-bent on kicking them down. Good to hear, Jareth said. And let's just say there's more where that came from. Humanity's not done clawing its way up yet. Sounds fun, Vex said, grinning wide enough to display a mouthful of sharpened teeth. Just don't expect a fair fight. I play dirty. Wouldn't have it any other way, Kira replied, her smirk a mirror of Jareth's. We've got a knack for turning unfair fights into our favor. They spent the next few hours hashing out details, strategies, and potential alliances with other factions within the swarm. It was the kind of diplomacy that involved a lot more threats and bravado than actual paperwork. The Dyson swarm had never been about niceties, more about who had the bigger gun and the guts to use it. As they wrapped up, Vex offered one last piece of advice. Watch your back, Captain. The swarm's a treacherous place, and not just because of the aliens. Noted. But we've got something they don't, Jareth said, ushering his crew toward the exit. And what's that? Vex asked, a curious eyebrow raised. A collective death wish, Kira quipped, her laughter echoing as they made their way back to the ship. Exactly, Jareth added, his grin widening. And a whole lot of stubbornness. Back on the ship, the atmosphere was lighter, despite the ever-looming sense of danger. Rook was at the controls, adjusting their course, while Kira was already plotting potential attack vectors. It was business as usual, with a side of impending doom. Think this alliance will hold? Rook asked, glancing over his shoulder. If it doesn't, we're back to square one, Jareth replied, joining him at the helm. But for now, it's our best shot. And besides, who doesn't love a good underdog story? The ship set off, leaving Vex's territory behind as they headed toward their next target. The universe was vast and uncaring, but now they had a chance, a sliver of hope amidst the chaos. As they settled into the familiar routine of life aboard the ship, Jareth felt the weight of command settle back onto his shoulders. But this time, it was tempered with the knowledge that they weren't alone. Humanity had allies, albeit unpredictable ones, and a chance to carve out a future. You know, Kira said, her voice cutting through the quiet, I think I'm starting to like this place. Sure, it's hell on a cosmic scale, but it's our hell. Jareth chuckled, the sound mingling with the hum of the engines. Here's to surviving it then, one grim day at a time. With their course set and a tentative alliance in place, the crew of the S. Are We Still Alive continued their journey through the Dyson swarm. The aliens might have been a threat, but humanity was proving to be more resilient and more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. And as they hurtled through the vastness of space, one thing was certain. In this grimdark galaxy, the fight was far from over. But for Jareth and his crew, that was just the way they liked it.